Okay, so Karuna puts her paws together and she says thank you because she got a gift from the Michigan Dharma cats of a box of toys that was bigger than herself. So she says thank you very much, right? And now I'm going to go play with them. Bye-bye. And she shared some with Maitri as well, so that enhanced community harmony a little bit. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today was a few days ago we got an email from somebody in Seattle who had been out rock climbing. He didn't say where, but somewhere quite remote, 7 hours from a dirt road. And he had a fall while rock climbing and broke both bones in his lower leg. And so fortunately he was with some other friends, so he stayed with 3 of his friends on a ledge of a cliff overnight while 2 of the friends walked out till they got to a place where they could make a phone call. They arrived there at midnight. And they made the phone call to call emergency services, and a helicopter came the next morning. The helicopter couldn't land because they were hanging on a cliff. But a couple of guys, I guess, do you call it rappel? You know, rappelled down and put him on a litter and then lifted him up and took him to an ambulance. And then they zoomed him off to Harborview in Seattle. So, you know, it's a thing filled with many Dharma lessons because, you know, you go out for a good time and you never think, oh, today something's going to happen that's going to change my life dramatically. You know, that thought never enters the mind, and yet, you know, a thing like this happens. He said he did very well comparatively, you know, during the night, in spite of his broken bones and, you know, sleeping on the edge of a cliff, because of the Dharma. He said he knew he knew how to work with his mind, and so he said he did as well as possible considering the situation, and even had a conversation with his cliff mate about vegetarianism during the night. And he talked a lot about the kindness of others, you know, because you really see and experience the kindness of others when you're incapacitated. When he got to Harborview, he was taken care of in the ER, but they didn't have an actual room to put him in on a ward, so he was in the emergency department next to the ER, which is very noisy and everything's going on there. And he was there for 6 days. So that was a bit difficult for him because it's, you know, he gets good nursing, but it's not a place for healing and silence and recovery. And so he was telling me about one very kind nurse who, because all he wanted to do is just look out a window. There were no windows in that ward. So one very kind nurse was going to take Lee with him to a meeting. The meeting got canceled, but he took Lee out somewhere so he could look out a window for 15 minutes. And he said that really, really helped him. So all this time he's really talking about the kindness of others, and this is what he's meditating on. It's really interesting how he was practicing, because while he was in that ward, he started having nightmares because it was so claustrophobic, and the noise and everything else going on. But then one night it was nightmares. The second night he was having nightmares of other people being bound and confined, and he had compassion for them in his dream, which I think is absolutely astounding when you're in critical care, you know, to have that kind of mind. He also said that his wife brought in a picture of His Holiness, and that just completely opened him up, because it made him remember that there are people in the world who have knowledge of his suffering and compassion for it, you know. And, you know, sometimes so much when we're suffering, just knowing that somebody else is aware of it and has compassion for us just already alleviates so much of the suffering. So that was very, very special to him. And I think that's what gave him the ability in his nightmare the following night to have compassion for the people he was dreaming about in the nightmare. Yeah. And now he's home, and several of his Dharma friends are coming to visit him. And he's really feeling this sense of community and how important that is. When he wrote the email, the title line was A Tale of Woe. But when he talked to me and said, you know, how grateful he was for having learned the Dharma, because it was really what was sustaining him through this. So when I responded, I said, it shouldn't be called a tale of woe, it should be called a tale of discovering inner resources, or a tale of compassion and refuge, because that's what he was actually doing with his mind. Okay, he was having a great deal of trouble sleeping with the pain, and he didn't want to take narcotics for the pain. So he asked me for recommendations. So I told him to say mantra, and he said that he hadn't thought of that because he thought the mantra would keep him awake. But when he wrote later, he said he did do that and it seemed to be working. But now I'm going to give him the real technique that works, which is what my friends in Hong Kong said. Whenever they wanted to sleep, they just had to listen to my tapes on low rig, and they were out. So, you know, low rig, you know, maybe Madhyamaka, the really deep sleep. You know. But I'm telling this story as a way, you know, so that we really see, you know, how an ordinary person can use the Dharma in a really difficult situation to keep their mind calm. And how in a difficult situation you focus so much on the kindness of others if you steer your mind in that direction. Otherwise, I mean, he could have steered his mind in who knows what direction, getting angry at this person and angry at that and feeling sorry for himself and blah, blah, blah. But he chose not to go in any of those directions because he knew the Dharma and he knew the power of his mind. Okay, so in the Refuge guidelines where it says don't lose, you know, really use your refuge in every situation you're in, this is a very good example of it. Yeah, and so not forgetting refuge when we have really real difficulties. But refuge, you know, when we use refuge, it doesn't mean that, you know, you're praying, oh Buddha, Buddha, please make my legs unbreak after they're broken. I mean, the Buddha can't do that. But when you take refuge, you know, in those situations, what you're really asking for is, what Dharma antidote should I contemplate right now that will help my mind transform adversity into the path to enlightenment? Okay? So when you make requests at that time or take refuge at that time, you know, the way the refuge helps you is by, you know, you get some inkling of what you need to think and how to direct your mind. Yeah? And then that really becomes a lifesaver for you and a very transformative practice.